There's a movement your body remembers, but your mind has long forgotten. A rhythm buried deep in the bones, passed down through blood, breath, and silence. It doesn't come from music. It comes from memory. The kind of memory that lives in your hips. The ancients didn't just dance for joy. They danced to heal, to mourn, to awaken, because they knew something we've forgotten, that the hips are not just joints, they're gateways. Within them lives grief you never cried, stories you never told, pleasure you never allowed. And every time you tighten your body, you close the door to your soul. But when the hips begin to move, not for performance, not for show, but with presence, with breath, something sacred unlocks. A spiral, a pulse, a current that rises from the earth and whispers, "You are not broken. You are just holding too much." Today, you'll step into a forgotten ritual, a rhythm that predates language, a medicine that begins where logic ends. No words, no techniques, just the truth your body has been waiting to remember. Because every time your hips move, the soul stirs, the past softens, and your energy field finally begins to respond. Don't ignore this. This is the dance that heals. The hips, sacred storage of soul and story. The hips are more than bones and muscles. They are a bowl of memory, a cradle where the ancient meets the present, and in nearly every sacred tradition, they were seen as the seat of life, the place where soul entered body and where the energy of creation began its rise. But in our modern world, we've turned them into nothing more than structural support, a joint, a mechanism. We sit on them, we ignore them, and slowly, silently, they freeze. Yet the hips are not passive, they are keepers. They hold the weight of everything you didn't process, the heartbreaks you moved on from too quickly, the desires you repressed, the rage you swallowed, the pleasure you were told to be ashamed of, and the grief that never found a voice. All of it sinks into the sacral basin, and it stays there, unmoving, like sediment at the bottom of a river. You might not notice it at first, just a little tightness, a little fatigue, a strange resistance to change. But over time, the signs grow louder. You feel stuck in your life, disconnected from your creativity, distant from your sensuality. You crave movement, but don't know where to begin. This is not random. This is the soul's tension stored in the hips. In ancient Egypt, the pelvic center was known as the womb of Ra, the place where divine light entered the body. In Sufi teachings, the whirling motion of the hips was seen as a way to dissolve the ego. In African healing traditions, the hips were the root of rhythmic trance, a dance that called in spirits and released ancestral pain. And in Taoist alchemy, this area was known as the cauldron, where life force was brewed and awakened. The body has never been separate from the spirit, but in the hips, this connection is especially alive. Because here, movement isn't just motion, it's memory unfolding. That's why so many of us feel fear when we start to move this area, not because something is wrong, but because something is ready to be felt, ready to be seen, ready to be freed. The hips speak a language older than words, and if you listen closely, they will begin to tell your story, not as you remember it, but as it's still living inside you. You may feel sadness. You may feel heat. You may even feel a joy you haven't touched in years. That is not weakness. That is remembrance. Because when the hips start to open, you're not just stretching tissue. You're unlocking generational silence. You're allowing yourself to be a vessel again, for energy to move, for emotion to rise, for the soul to speak through the flesh. This is why dance has always been sacred, not because it entertains, but because it remembers. When you let your hips move with intention, you're not just expressing, you're rebalancing the field. You're shifting the rhythm of your nervous system. You're reweaving a broken thread between the past and the present. And suddenly, you don't feel so heavy anymore. Because the hips, they never wanted to trap you. They just wanted to be heard. The dance that heals. Rituals of the ancients. Long before the world was mapped by borders, long before language became divided by grammar, there was movement. And that movement was sacred. The ancients didn't write their deepest truths in books. They stored them in the body, in breath, in gesture, in rhythm. And the most powerful of these rituals was dance, but not the kind we know today. Not choreography, not performance. Theirs was a ceremony, a direct communication between flesh and spirit, between earth and sky. Every sway of the hips, every spiral of the spine, every vibration through the feet was a code, a way to open the body and release what words could not carry. They danced to grieve, to call back lost fragments of the soul. They danced to celebrate, to let joy rise through the bones and touch the stars. And they danced to heal, because the body knew exactly what it needed, if only it was allowed to move. In many tribal traditions, healing was never separated from movement. The shaman would enter trance through rhythmic stomping. The mother would soothe pain by swaying her hips in deep circles. The child, when upset, would rock back and forth, instinctively. They all knew. Stillness in the body was not peace. It was held energy, and movement was how the soul breathed. In African traditions, the Dagara people held grief rituals, where communities would gather and move their sorrow together. They understood, if pain isn't danced, it becomes disease. If joy isn't moved through the hips, it becomes tension. In the temples of India, temple dancers weren't entertainers. They were priestesses. Their sacred gestures were offerings, each step a transmission of energy, each sway of the pelvis a wave that linked the material and the divine. And in the Middle East, before it was romanticized, belly dance was a ritual of womb activation, of feminine awakening. The hips didn't seduce, they summoned. They called forth life force from the earth and stirred it through the body to awaken the sleeping parts of the soul. All of these cultures knew something modern science is just beginning to touch. Emotion is energy, and energy must move. When it doesn't, it stagnates. When it stagnates, it hardens. And when it hardens, it becomes illness, fatigue, numbness. But when it moves, something incredible happens. The nervous system begins to reset, old emotional patterns dissolve, and the body remembers how to feel safe again. This is the dance that heals. It doesn't ask you to look perfect. It doesn't need you to know the steps. It just asks, can you feel what's been trapped? And will you let it move? Because when you do, when you finally let the hips rotate, when you let your pelvis circle like the moon, when you let your spine undulate like water, you don't just feel better. You begin to return to a self beneath the stories, to a rhythm older than your name, to the truth that healing isn't in doing more. It's in remembering what your body already knows. The ancients didn't separate movement from spirit. They knew the way we move is the way we live. And if we stop moving, we stop feeling. And if we stop feeling, we forget how to heal. But it's not too late. Your body remembers, and it's waiting for you to listen, for you to move, for you to dance, and awaken the soul that's been silently waiting inside your hips. The activation. How to feel the ancestral rhythm again, somewhere between the noise of modern life and the silence we carry inside. The ancestral rhythm waits. It doesn't shout. It doesn't push. It pulses quietly beneath your skin, beneath the stories, beneath the tension you forgot you were holding. You don't need to learn it. You only need to remember it. Because this rhythm is not new. It lived in your grandmother's hips when she moved without music. It lived in the earth beneath your ancestors' feet as they stomped through ritual. It lived in the pauses between your breaths when you were just a child, wild and open. So how do you feel it again? You begin by doing nothing except listening. Sit, not as a thinker, but as a receiver. Place one hand on your lower belly, the other on your heart, and just feel. No need to name the sensations. Just observe. Is your breath shallow? Is your belly tight? Does your chest feel distant from your hips? This is the first doorway. Awareness without judgment. And now, we breathe. Not from the chest, not from the mind, but from the center. Take a slow inhale, as if you're pulling life from the earth through your spine. Let it rise, not forced, but as a spiral. Let it fill your belly, your chest, your throat. Pause. Now exhale through your mouth, slowly, like a sigh you've been holding for years. Let it melt through your hips. Do this again. Inhale, spiral. Exhale, soften. With each breath, you are not just breathing. You are summoning, calling back the rhythm that once guided you. Now, the hips. Let them begin to move, not with logic, but with instinct. A subtle circle, a gentle sway, nothing dramatic, nothing rehearsed, just the body, responding to the breath, like water, responding to the moon. This is not about performing. This is communion. Each rotation of your pelvis is a key turning inside an ancient lock. Each sway is a memory being massaged back into your awareness, and each moment of presence is a reconnection with the lineage that lives in your cells. Let your spine follow. Let your neck soften. Let the jaw unclench, because the rhythm doesn't just live in the hips. It wants to move through you. You are not just a body practicing a ritual. You are the ritual itself. The dance is not separate from you. You are the drum. You are the breath. You are the story the ancestors once told without words. And with every movement, you are reminding your body that it is safe to feel, to open, to be alive again. Feel the rhythm. It's not in the music. It's not even in the motion. It's in the remembering. You've just activated something sacred, a doorway that only opens when the hips move without shame, when the breath spirals without force, when the soul whispers, "Welcome back." What unlocks when you let the hips flow? What happens when you stop holding it all together, when the tight grip in your hips finally lets go, when the frozen rhythm begins to melt, when you no longer resist the very movement your soul has been begging for? Something ancient unlocks, because your hips, they've never just been joints or muscles, they've been vaults, holding the emotions you couldn't process, holding the shame you were taught to bury, holding the grief that never got to breathe, holding the power that was never given permission to rise. And when you let your hips flow, you don't just release tension, you free the language of your soul. Suddenly, you feel more grounded, but also more light. Suddenly you notice your breath moving deeper, your spine moving softer, your heart opening, not because someone told you to, but because the body finally feels safe enough to expand. Letting your hips flow isn't a performance, it's a permission. It tells your nervous system, I'm not in danger anymore. I can be here now, I can feel and not break. And from that place, your creativity starts waking up. Ideas you've buried begin to rise. Conversations feel more honest. You begin to move through life, not like you're surviving it, but like you're participating in it. You stop chasing alignment and start becoming alignment. Relationships shift. Why? Because when your hips flow, your energy field becomes more truthful, more magnetic, and people feel it, not just in what you say, but in how you exist. Even money responds differently, because flow creates frequency, and frequency creates results. But the real shift, you stop needing to escape your body to feel spiritual. You realize your hips have been trying to tell you you were never disconnected. You were only holding too much. And now, that holding becomes movement. That silence becomes rhythm. That tension becomes a path. When your hips flow freely, your soul is no longer locked behind old pain. It begins to dance through you. And this is what the ancients knew. They didn't separate healing from movement. They didn't separate the body from the divine. They let the hips guide the way. Because once the hips flow, everything else follows. Your jaw unclenches. Your heart softens. Your intuition sharpens. Your life begins to reflect the freedom you reclaimed inside yourself. So the next time you feel blocked, stuck, emotionally numb, don't look outside. Don't force yourself to think your way out. Move. Let the rhythm return. Let the spiral unfold. Let the hips speak the truth you forgot you were allowed to live. Because when the hips move freely, the soul remembers its way home. Your soul remembers the dance. There's a memory inside you, older than your name, older than your story. It lives in the rhythm of your hips, in the spiral of your spine, in the silence between each heartbeat. You were never meant to be still for so long, never meant to hold your power in tight, locked muscles. The earth does not stay frozen. The stars do not sit still, and neither should you. Because your soul, it remembers the dance, even if your mind forgot, even if your culture silenced it, even if the pain made you tighten and hide. Your body still knows. The hips still carry the drumbeat. The sacrum still hums with the pulse of creation. And each time you move, not to impress, not to perform, but to feel. Each time you let the hips sway, even slightly, you awaken something holy. You activate the rhythm of your lineage. You breathe life into your own forgotten temple. You don't just move the body. You move stuck time, stuck stories, stuck power. So if this video stirred something inside you, if a spark was lit in your belly, if a part of you whispered, "Yes, this is mine," then move, even if it's slow, even if no one sees, even if it scares you. Because when you do, the soul smiles, the body exhales, and the dance continues. This is not the end. This is your return. And every time you move, your soul remembers.